Pass 2-5, pass 100, CRJ. American 472, Washington, 1 star, 32017.
Did you see that?
I don't know if you caught earlier what happened, but there was a collision on the approach to 33. We're going to be shutting down operations for the indefinite future if you want to go back to the gate.
Yeah, we witnessed the whole thing. If you need any information from us.
Okay, not quite yet, but just remain on frequency, and I'll give you a phone number here in a second.
After a devastating and deadly mid-air collision between a commercial passenger airline and a military helicopter over Washington, D.C. on Wednesday night, the president held a press conference with no information and a lot of divisive conclusions about who's to blame.
Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into a little spot, a little dot on the map, a little runway. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan. Think of that. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite. The FAA website shows that the agency's guidance on diversity hiring were last updated on March 23rd of 22. They wanted to make it even more so. And then I came in, and I assume maybe this is the reason. The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit.
The president read off a list of all the kinds of people that are allowed to be hired at the FAA before baselessly and profanely connecting it to Pete Buttigieg. He went through it like a little kid that's still refining his ability to read without hesitation and sounding out the words. But his point was a simple one. There aren't enough white people in the FAA.
The Department of Transportation is government agency charged with regulating civil aviation. Well, he runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity. So I had to say that it's terrible. Then it's a group within the FAA, another story, determined that the workforce was too white, that they had concerted efforts to get the administration to change that and to change it immediately. This was in the Obama administration just prior to my getting there.
Barack Obama left office in 2016. And instead of having the concern to actually look into the cause of this crash that killed 64 people and 3 servicemen, his primary objective was to shed any potential responsibility. He had to go back to Barack Obama to avoid even asking what happened, because he's a self-righteous piece of shit. And he showed it even more once he finally took questions about his blatant lies and bigotry.
The cited FAA text that you read is real, but the implication that this policy is new or that it stems from efforts that began under President Biden or the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is demonstrably false. It's been on the FAA's
Who said
website.
That, you?
No, it's on the website, the FAA's website. It was there in 2013. It was there for the entirety.
What I read.
It was there for the entirety of your administration
nice
too. So my question is, why didn't you change the policy during your first administration?
I did change it. I changed the Obama policy, and we had a very good policy. And then Biden came in, and he changed it. And then when I came in 3 days ago, I signed a new order, bringing it to the highest level of intelligence. Okay.
It was on the website.
Please. Quiet.
You see, reporters that seek the truth through an authoritarian leader's lies are shut down and eventually banned from these kinds of briefings. I said it before. The goal is to take this administration's words as fact and dismiss any actual reporting or evidence that disproves it. It's a standard element of fascism.
President, we don't even yet know the names of the 67 people who were killed, and you are blaming Democrats and DEI policies and air traffic control and seemingly the member of the U.S. military who was flying that Black Hawk helicopter. Don't you think you're getting ahead of the investigation right now?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think with the names of the people, you mean the names of the people that are on the plane? You think that's going to make a difference?
Does it comfort their families
They
to
are
hear you
a group of
blaming
people that have lost their lives. If you want a list of the names, we can give you that. We'll be giving that very soon. We're in coordination with American Airlines. We're in coordination very strongly, obviously, with the military. But I think that's not a very smart question.
But are you
I'm
blaming,
surprised coming from you.
Are you blaming your
Caitlin Collins brought up the very recently deceased passengers on the airplane, probably realizing that their families might be watching to see if the President of the United States has any information to give about the tragedy that they're currently living through. But he's so detached from humanity, he thought she was simply looking for their names while getting defensive.
Mr. President, you have today blamed the diversity elements, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistake. We then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
I pay attention to the wild bigotry, because now common sense to him is the assumption with absolutely no evidence that the reason for anything that goes wrong is diversity's fault. That there are too many women, disabled, black, brown, and Asian folks in the FAA, and they need to be purged. Yeah, he added disabled Americans to his enemies list, which is very similar to the playbook that another fascist in world history utilized for his ethnic cleansing. He says diversity is the common sense answer, after confirming the facts don't match up with his version of common sense.
On DEI and the claims that you've made, are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power, you have to go by psychological quality. And psychological quality is a very important element of it. These are various very powerful tests that we put to use, and they were terminated by Biden. And Biden went by a standard that's the exact opposite. So we don't know, but we do know that you had two planes at the same level. You had a helicopter and a plane. That shouldn't have happened. And we'll see. We're going to look into that, and we're going to see. But certainly for an air traffic controller, we want the brightest, the smartest, the sharpest. We want somebody that's psychologically superior, and that's what we're going to have.
It was such a disorganized statement of hatred and division, he couldn't even keep up with what he had already admitted before declaring that the opposite was actually true. He said that it was and it wasn't the fault of the air traffic controller. The same about the servicemen flying the helicopter. The only lie that he wanted to pass on was that diversity cannot result in anyone bright, smart, sharp, or psychologically superior, he said. That only white people have those characteristics. 3 of those very unimpressive people also showed up to this propaganda briefing with Trump. And it wasn't to provide information, but to promote him for no other reason than to deify him in the middle of this tragedy.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would just note the President's leadership has been remarkable during this crisis. We have had a whole of government response, local, state, federal, and when you see that kind of cooperation, it begins with the leadership in this body. So thank you for that, Mr. President. You make our jobs a lot easier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary said about your leadership. From the moment we found out about this, we were in contact with the White House trying to determine exactly what happened.
Now stop and think about that. Their primary objective was to praise Donald Trump for his leadership and professionalism before even thinking of the 64 people that just died. It's because fascists need to be constantly propped up above any and everything else. They have to be considered superhuman by the people that worship them, so that when disasters happen or purposeful devastation is handed down, like the decision to freeze federal aid a couple days ago, no one is allowed to recognize or lay any blame at the feet of the omnipotent one. And what was the message from the 3 stooges that were supposed to be there to provide information from their positions of privilege? It was to push that same propaganda, that diversity is the problem, all while this happened right under their 3 white noses.
Something the president said that I think bears re-emphasizing, which is that when you don't have the best standards in who you're hiring, it means on the one hand, you're not getting the best people in government, but on the other hand, it puts stresses on the people who are already there. And I think that is a core part of what President Trump is going to bring and has already brought to Washington, D.C. is we want to hire the best people because we want the best people at air traffic control, and we want to make sure we have enough people at air traffic control who are actually competent to do the job. If you go back to just some of the headlines over the past 10 years, you have many hundreds of people suing the government because they would like to be air traffic controllers, but they were turned away because of the color of their skin. That policy ends under Donald Trump's leadership because safety is the first priority of our aviation industry.
You made an important point that when we deal with safety, we can only accept the best and the brightest in positions of safety that impact the lives of our loved ones, our family members. And I think you make a really important point on that, Mr. President. That is the motto of your presidency, the best and the brightest, the most intelligent coming into these spaces.
But I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary and you, Mr. President, said, because it pertains to the DOD as well. We will have the best and brightest in every position possible. As you said in your inaugural, it is colorblind and merit-based. The best leaders possible.